Welcome back to another episode of Chip Chat. This is episode number 8. I am here with Jose on a Thursday afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. Jose, how are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty excited. I mean, it gets me excited. The semiconductor market gives us news almost on a daily basis, so we always have something to talk about during this episode.
Yeah, this one's going to be a fun one. We got a bunch of topics to cover. A lot of some of the broader tech companies decided to go for Jensen's throat this week, and we'll have Jose break down if they are going to be successful or not. Please leave your questions in the chat, and we'll get to all of them at the very end. But we got a bunch of topics to get to in the beginning. Let's start off with Intel. I think that's where we got to go. Intel says they have a new chip called the Gaudi A1 accelerator. I might be saying the name wrong, but it's the Gaudi chip, and they think it's better than the H100. I'll leave it to you, Jose, to kind of give us the introduction to what this chip is and why the hell Intel thinks they can compete with Daddy Jensen.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen I've seen that clip of you doing your day of the day of word of the day.
Word of the day. Yeah.
So you might be saying correctly. I normally call it the Gaudi.
Okay.
But again, I don't usually. I could be saying it wrong, but yeah. So Intel had an Intel Vision event this past Monday and Tuesday where they showcased a lot of cool products. Let me kind of just share my screen here so we can take a closer look. And Intel, I mean, this Gaudi 3 is an AI accelerator. It's a little bit different than Nvidia's H100, and H100 is more of a GPU, which is meant for a lot of different workloads, where the Gaudi 3 is mainly meant for AI accelerators. And maybe this one might not be necessarily something big for Nvidia investors to kind of either fear. I wouldn't say the next one is, but in next year, they are planning to kind of create a GPU solution using this AI accelerator. So this is more like continuing to make stepping stones for their walk to the GPU market for the data center and AI space. The other thing that I thought was pretty interesting with Gaudi 3 is this is the only AI chip. There's this quarterly benchmark that happens where you can benchmark your chip against other against kind of just to see how it does in certain workloads. Gaudi 3 is the only other AI chip out there that does the benchmark. Nvidia is the one that dominates the benchmarks. They're the ones that destroy it. They're always the top, and no one else there, not even AMD, has kind of joined this benchmarks. The only one that has done so has been Intel with their Gaudi platform, their Gaudi 2. So it does showcase that Intel believes at the end of the day that they might have something here. The one difference here, though, I think, is Intel is focusing in a different market. I think Intel's focusing more on enterprises and business. Maybe let's say you're a business and you want to develop some form of AI solution and you don't want to bring it to the cloud. You're going to end up probably buying some of Intel's Gaudi chips, where Nvidia, right, they're really focusing on their big customers, or who Meta platforms, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, right? So they're focusing on those cloud players that are buying hundreds and hundreds of thousands of GPUs. So I wouldn't say it's a bad thing for Nvidia, but if you are an Intel investor, there's some reasons to be bullish, in my opinion.
Okay, so the way I'm understanding this announcement when they're saying they're competing with the H100 is that the H100 is used in a variety of different use cases as, one of the premier GPUs. Your argument is in the context of AI acceleration, the Gaudi chip / platform is a bit differentiated and can do things a little differently that companies might be willing to pay for outside of just the H100, correct?
Yeah, and the only other thing is the Gaudi 3, because no one's out there forming a huge line to buy a Gaudi 3 like they are for the H100. It means they do have amounts of their lead times are a lot shorter. I was just looking at a report recently. Got the H100 is still at almost a 2 to 3 month lead time. And certain companies, right, you can't wait 2 to 3 months before you start developing something. You need it right away. So they might go out there to pay a cheaper price per chip for the Gaudi 3 so they can get started right away. So there's a little bit of incentives there, but we've heard from Jensen before where it's no longer the price of the chip, it's the price of the platform. What other solutions does NVIDIA bring to you that makes it, hey, our competitors can give their chips for free and we still will have a better value in the long term of things?
Now, why exactly are they saying they compete with the H100? Like, would Tesla ever use Intel's Gaudi for FSD or Dojo?
I mean, they in theory they could. In theory they could. It could be used for AI workloads. Um, Will they? I don't know. I think Tesla is always focusing on using the best of the best. So they're gonna be using either their Dojo or their H100. But in theory, for certain AI workloads, they can kind of offset it with some of those other platforms as well.
Right. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking that it's not literally going because Nvidia stock is not down on this. Intel is down because of the foundry business stuff we talked about last week, but this has not been a big momentum boosting catalyst for the stock. And I think it's because investors are saying, well, you're not really taking any of Nvidia's lunch, so maybe we don't need to necessarily give you the premium yet until you show us the numbers.
Yeah, so I think for Nvidia, definitely they shouldn't be worried. But like I mentioned, I think Intel investors, they even if they get a little bit of the crumbs of Nvidia's lunch, which I think is potential due to a supply constraint, then they can definitely benefit a nice amount. So just because it might be bullish for Intel, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be bearish for Nvidia because their market is just so huge right now.
Got it. Okay, cool. So that is the Intel update. Let's move on here to Google. Google said they were going to flex their muscles. Stock is at basically an all-time high after being down at the 130s over some Gemini controversy stuff that happened about 4 weeks ago.
Yep.
Google
March 6th, I think.
March 6th. Okay, so basically last month. Google unveiled a new chip. It is a ARM CPU processor that is on this chip. And the idea behind Google's chip is that they essentially want to have a similar effort on the AI cloud infrastructure that Azure and AWS are going after. So this is not really a GPU. This is a CPU. So can you give us some clarity on what you think that means, why ARM is involved here, and if this is anything that NVIDIA should be kind of scared about at all?
Yes. So let me just share my screen here really quick. I do have the presentation from Google. Hopefully it's a black screen right now. Hopefully
There you go.
can you see that? Yep. All right. So Google has not it's not new to creating its own chips. They actually have been working in chips for various years. In 2015, they released like their first generation of TPU. Now this TPU, what they have is an AI accelerator, and they continue to develop. I think they're now in their fifth generation of TPU. So they have an AI accelerator that you can kind of compare to that Gaudi 3, and that helps kind of offset maybe some dependency of NVIDIA's H100. And this is why I think certain investors shouldn't really be worried about other players entering in the AI accelerator. Google has been doing it for what, almost the past 10 years, trying to create some form of AI accelerator. And at the end of the day, they're still a huge, huge customer of NVIDIA, even with their fifth generation. So it just kind of showcases how far ahead we're seeing here in the AI space. Now, Google just announced this new CPU that you mentioned, the Axion. And the Axion, right, the CPU is there's two main players that create CPUs in the data center side. First is AMD, and second is Intel, right? We kind of talked about Intel in the past. So I think this news is more worrisome for Intel and AMD, in my opinion, because if we take a closer look at one of the things they said, they mentioned that they have found that the rate of CPU improvements has slowed recently. So if it's slowed recently, they're like, okay, if it's not improving at such a rapid pace, then it makes sense for us to kind of create our own chips because we know those players that are making these CPUs are not going to make anything too much better than what we're going to be making. So if anything, I think this is more bad news for CPU companies, and it kind of just reminds me a little bit of Apple. If we remember, Apple back then used to get their chips that go on the phones and the laptops made by Intel. And Apple was like, hey, look, you guys are not developing fast enough. So we're going to go out there and develop our own chip in general. So I think this just continues to showcase that maybe the CPU space is slowing down dramatically. And if you are in a company that's dealing with the CPU market, you definitely have to find another form of growth opportunity. I think that's why Intel is focusing on their foundry business and why AMD is focusing on their GPUs like the MI300X, because they see this competition heating up in the CPU space.
From a Google investor's perspective, the street liked this news. You're saying it's not necessarily competing with NVIDIA, more so with Intel. Is this like a good catalyst for Google's stock? You think this is a good business stream, or it's one of those things that they're just throwing at the wall and seeing if they can make any money off of it?
No, I think this is a great way for them to improve their clouding solution. I mean, at the end of the day, they need to showcase to their customers, hey, look, if you come to us, um, you're going to have the best form of infrastructure available. We have our own CPU that is going to be better than whatever Amazon or Microsoft might have. We have AI accelerators like the TPU that might be better than anything Amazon and Microsoft might have. So it just brings more incentives to increase their clouding infrastructure so we can definitely see a benefit in their Google Cloud solutions. So I think this is something they definitely have to go because it's going to reduce the cost of their expenses of going to like AMD or Intel and improve overall margins in their clouding business. So I think this is a great move for them, and it's definitely something that can help improve their clouding market, which is obviously a big growing factor of Alphabet's overall stock in general.
Yeah, one quick stat here for everybody. Google's business has cloud growing faster and representing 11% of the company revenue. Obviously, search is closer to 75%. Google held 7.5% of the cloud infrastructure market in 2022. Amazon and Microsoft together controlled around 62%. So they are a small player in the cloud infrastructure space in comparison to AWS and Azure. Obviously, in
Mhm.
search, they're the market leaders, and that's what they focus the majority of their efforts on. But as we've been having a sort of constant debate, and not just you and I talking about it, but everyone talking about Google's search monopoly is eventually going to maybe not die out, but get significantly smaller than it is right now because the cost of inference and training is up and people just want better results than 10 blue links. They're going to have to diversify the business in some capacity.
Mhm.
And if that means cloud-based AI infrastructure, which they seem poised to be able to do because the TPUs you talked about that they started a couple years ago, this seems like the right direction ultimately for them to
Mhm.
go into.
Yeah, and I mean, Google, even though they get so much nonsense for their AI, I think their AI push in both just things like Gemini and Gemini Pro is going to also help drive more growth into their clouding market. And like you mentioned, it's super small compared to like your AWS, compared to your Microsoft Cloud, and things like that is going to help grow that market share, especially right now during this AI race.
Yeah, and I mean Gemini does get a ton of shit, but it's good. Like I use it pretty much every week. Maybe not every day, but like when I have a real time question, I ask it something. I ask it to summarize what's going on in the news, and it gives bullet pointed answers. Which ChatGPT, because it searches with Bing and Bing sucks, I
Mhm.
usually don't get the best responses. But Gemini, given how it works with Google, it's not bad at all. Not bad to me. Let's go to this piece of news. This one was interesting. So Elon Musk says that the next generation Grok 3 model, which is Twitter's competitor to ChatGPT and Gemini, will require 100,000 NVIDIA H100 GPUs to train.
Insane.
So, first question to you before we get into this: do you use Grok at all?
Yes, I do. I kind of have a few faceless YouTube channels
Oh,
that
really?
I'm kind of growing. They're still pretty small, but I feel like the best place to find what's trendy is through Grok, because Grok can kind of see everything that's being talked about on X on Twitter. So that's where I use Grok mainly. I don't think I use it for any kind of information diving or technicality stuff like I use maybe Chat GPT for, but for things that are trending, I use Grok in general.
So, what do you ask to Grok when you're trying to find trending stuff? Just like tell me what's
So
going on in the news.
yeah, so like I have three different niche type channels, and I kind of already know what I'm looking for. So I'm like, hey, Grok, is there anything trendy around this type of topic right now? And it kind of gives me, hey, in the past days, we've seen an influx of growth in this type of topic. So it helped me kind of determine what kind of videos to get outsourced to get creative for the channels.
This is so interesting, dude, because I don't use Grok at all, and I'm a power user of Twitter. I pay for the fucking premium $23 a stupid month for this shit, and I never use Grok because like it indexes tweets, and tweets to me are not. I mean, tweets are a good source of information, but it doesn't give it in the way I want it. The ChatGPT just gives it a little bit quicker to me, and so it's weird. I don't use it as much as I probably should, but someone like you is using it for a particular niche, and there's 500 million Twitter users. Elon said a couple weeks ago they're getting 1.7 million new people a day, which is still small compared to Instagram, but still, I mean, there's new people that are getting exposed to Grok. So, what do you think about them getting 100,000 H100 GPUs, and would that actually make it competitive with something like ChatGPT?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think Grok One, if we looked at the test, it's not necessarily the worst AI model out there. I know there's pretty much a nice amount, and we're only in Grok 1. They did mention that Grok 2 version should be coming out soon, and that one required as many as 20, you have it right there, 20,000 Nvidia H100. So we'll see where Grok 2 is going to lead. Maybe, I think Elon has mentioned that Grok 2 itself is going to be one of the best ones out there. But Grok 3, whatever, requiring 100,000, it just kind of continues to showcase that these companies are focusing on large language models, and they need that AI GPU, either being 100,000 H100s or maybe 50,000 of their next generation Blackwell 100. At the end of the day, it just continues to showcase Grok 3 is not going to be the end. There's going to be a 4. There's Llama 3 being built right now, Llama 4, Llama 5 from Meta platforms. OpenAI has ChatGPT 5. They'll eventually have 6, 7, and 8. So they're going to continue to need these AI solutions, which just bode well for the semiconductor market.
Okay, so going back to Nvidia, if Grok needs 100,000 of these chips, it seems like Nvidia's demand, even from an announcement like this, is not slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what is your take on Nvidia's stock as well? It's just a quick segment on that. That being up, we got a hot CPI, hot PPI. Nvidia is trying to get back to 900. Do you just think investors don't care about inflation? They just want exposure?
I mean, with Nvidia, I mean, at the end of the day, you still have a supply constraint market on their GPUs, so they're just gonna sell no matter what we see with the numbers out there. So big companies are gonna continue to invest. I I'm gonna say that obviously it's gonna be on record. I believe this quarter, either this quarter or next quarter, we're gonna see Google and all these big players increase their capital expenditure a lot more than they did last quarter. I think last quarter we kind of got a nice bullish trend, but I think just the overall discussions we've heard about this past quarter alone, we're gonna see capex amount increase from the big cloud server providers, and I think that's going to be a nice catalyst for Nvidia.
And that's a catalyst because they're going to be buying more from Nvidia, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one else. I mean, they're gonna buy MI300X, but I was reading that that's the AMD chip. I was listening to an AMD call. That one has just on manufacturing time, not on lead, on just manufacturing time. It's about a 7-month manufacturing product because it's just so many types of different things that they need to do to create this chip is pretty long. So even though the MI300X is out, their supply is going to be very low because of the huge manufacturing time. So at the end of the day, I think Nvidia is just going to continue to dominate this space.
So the price target increases, Keyblank 1,200, Goldman Sachs 1,000, Morgan Stanley also 1,000. You think all those price targets are still in line with the estimates, even if they're supply constrained, that these firms are realizing Nvidia could probably pump up to if they put up a good earnings?
I mean, I normally don't follow price targets from analysts because anything can happen from here on out. I think in the long term, yes, Nvidia can definitely hit those prices. I don't know if it'll hit it within the next 12 months, as most of these analysts are saying. Usually, we start to see right when things start to go good, you start to see analysts increase price targets. When things start to go bad, you start to see analysts decrease price targets. So, I mean, I wouldn't invest on based on those price targets, but I do believe in the long term, Nvidia can definitely hit those numbers.
All right. Guys, we got one more segment. If any questions at all, please put them in the chat and we will get to all of the questions. Okay, we have an MTAI announcement. I actually don't know much about this. So what is going on here with MTAI?
Yeah, so again, this is from Meta Platforms. So Meta Platforms is another big player that purchases the H100, but Meta Platforms is also another big player that's creating their own semiconductor solutions. So the MTIA, I think, is Meta's Training Inferencing Accelerator. I think if that's the reason it's called MTIA.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Meta Training and Inference Accelerator. So this is their version 2. And this is overall going to be used for things like AI inferencing. And we know Meta is a huge AI company. They're using it to showcase their ads to the right person, to showcase content to the right person, to make sure you as a user stay on their platform longer. So for companies like Meta, I think it makes perfect sense for them to create their own chip. And the reason being is when you create your own chip, especially these ASIC solutions, you usually create them for one specific workload. And Meta, they already know that workload that they're using. They're most likely going to use that same type of workload for numerous years. So for them to make a chip, it probably it makes a lot of sense. At the end of the day, we still know that Meta buys plenty of H100s. They probably have a nice order of B200s as well. So again, these are chips that they help them offset some cost and still allows them to invest in companies like Nvidia. So bullish in my opinion for Meta, not necessarily bearish for Nvidia.
So Meta, what is Meta trying to do here with large scale infrastructure accelerators? I mean, like, so they already buy a ton of H100 chips. Obviously, they're doing a ton of training for their ad targeting. But do you think they're trying to create kind of like an open source platform, not just with Llama, but with this inference accelerator, so that a lot of other companies could use their architecture to
Yeah.
offload AI workloads, basically?
Yeah. So I think Meta is going to be a bigger AI company than OpenAI
Wow, really?
in the future. I
Huh.
think Meta has luckily a cash cow, which is their advertisement, right? Their
Right,
advertisement solution. And
right.
they have all these AI solutions that help them with their ads. Mark Zuckerberg has kind of talked about it in the past, where right now they're open sourcing things like Llama 2, Llama 3, and all these solutions because in the open source market, it's easier for developers to come and see any bugs, to kind of just improve the development process of those large language models and kind of out of those AI solutions. And Meta believes that, hey, look, right now where we're at in the AI phase, it's not something that we can really create a product out of. But if we open source these solutions, if we become the best of the best in this market, maybe being Llama 6, Llama 7, who knows, in the future, it's going to be so good that we can eventually create a product that will make us a lot of money here in the AI space.
Uh,
So I think right now Meta is kind of thinking that long-term game. We're going to give these as open source solutions so we can improve in the long term of things. Eventually, we're going to be able to get that technology and create some form of product that's either going to help their advertisement market, their metaverse market, their VR market, or whatever type of solution that they're doing as well. Because Meta has a lot of things for video, for detection, for vision, for audio. They have so many different AI models that are out there open source. And I think they're going to continue to improve as they continue to buy thousands of H100 GPUs and their MTIA solution that they announced here too.
Dude, this is really interesting. And I, I've said publicly that one of my biggest regrets is not buying Meta at like 200, 100, because I had Meta, then I sold it, and then I just never got back in because I always felt they were a bit more serious than just advertising, even though they are top 3 in the world when it comes to advertising, right? Them and Google are the main ones there. But if they become a real AI play, better than OpenAI, because at the end of the day, the LLMs are commodities, and OpenAI is really just selling an LLM, right? They're just first
Mhm.
to market, so they have all the exposure. But if they become a de facto AI platform that fuels the advertising business, that can subsidize anything they want to do, like the metaverse, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. Let's say it doesn't happen. They have a thriving advertising business. Now they're trying to become a platform slash accelerator for all other companies in the world to be able to use either their models or their inference training. I mean, Meta got upgraded to 600 by a couple other firms. It doesn't seem that crazy to think that Meta is cheap right now
Mhm.
at this current state.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if you think their AI push, and I believe their AI push is going to be successful, Meta can gain obviously from the boost in eventually, right? The economy, we're going to have lower rates in the future. We're going to have better economy in the future. So you're going to have more advertisement sales in general. So you're going to see a boost in there. But then in general, you're also going to see an improvements in AI solution. And if the improvements of those AI solutions are strong, with AI, I think it makes Meta's metaverse product even stronger
Yeah.
because they'll be like, hey, look, we have all this vision data, we have all this text data, create me a world. Again, this is probably far thinking, but in the top level overview, create me a world that will be fun to play for this, blah, 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 blah. And they'll be able to create that with all their AI infrastructure that they have in house and all the data that they've created throughout the way. So, if you kind of start to put those pieces together, their metaverse world, their meta whatever, doesn't seem that far fetched in my opinion. But again, I could be wrong and I could just be a crazy lunatic here.
No, I agree, dude. If you could literally talk to your Oculus and say, "Hey, create me a world, blah 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 blah," and it uses NLP and it has these advanced models, and you create the world you're in. I mean, that sounds like a dream, and maybe it is a decade away, but it doesn't seem like Apple's working on this shit. It doesn't seem like Apple's doing anything, quite frankly. Um, Yeah, it'll be exciting. Okay, let's move on to Q&A. Thank you everybody for being here again. Jose's Twitter and YouTube is in the chat now, and it's also in the description. He just crossed 40,000 on YouTube.
Yep. Thank
So
you.
congrats
Thank
on that.
you.
How does that feel, dude? 40,000 people. That's
It's insane. It's crazy. Yeah.
like you're just a regular guy talking about stocks on the internet,
Yeah.
and people follow. It's
Yeah.
great. It's super awesome, man. Congrats. That's an amazing
No,
thing.
I'm completely grateful, right? It's amazing the amount of love I get. Obviously, you get some hate in this world, but you have to deal with it. And it's probably I'm happy a few years ago I took the plunge and I was like, you know what? Let me do this full time and see where it goes.
What's the craziest hate comment you've ever gotten? Do you remember?
I don't know. It's usually some like Spanish thing. I don't know. It's
It's
I
something. It's always
fumble.
something racist, dude. It's always
Yeah,
something. Like I've
I
gotten
mean,
the
I fumble
terrorist.
my words a lot, so it also has to do with that. So I don't think about them too much.
Yeah, no, and that's the right way to do it, dude. People will criticize every last little detail until they actually have to, maybe do it themselves. Okay, let's talk Q&A. So, how is Meta seemingly ahead of Apple in chip development? Apple has been sandbagging billions for over a decade. So, Apple used to use Intel, then they created their own M3 chips. Do you think Apple is behind in chip development, given where Meta and Nvidia and Google are taking it, or is Apple cooking up stuff that we don't really know about?
I think they're not behind in chip development. I mean, we've seen amazing results from their M3, their M3 Pro, and their M3 Max. I think they're definitely behind in the AI large language model market. And that's why I don't know if we talked about it previously, but we've heard rumors that Apple is in discussion with like Google to kind of get their large language model. Maybe Apple just sees the large language model as a commodity, so they're just willing to pay for the best. So I think they're just behind in the AI space, but they definitely have a great team when it comes to semiconductor solution. And I wouldn't put it past them that when they release the M4, we're going to see some great AI performance. And then we're eventually, I think their next event, when they talk about their M4, we're going to start to see more AI solutions come out from Apple that people are going to be excited about. Even though I'm not an Apple shareholder and I don't think I ever will be.
Well, why you say you never will be? You said that
I don't
you said that aggressively. Why would you?
I don't know. I mean, their ecosystem.
Do you have an
There's
iPhone?
nothing. I do, but it's like
Okay.
that's the only thing I do. I've never gone through that whole rabbit hole. The main reason I bought it was a few years ago. There was one app when I was developing content that only was on Apple, so it forced me to get it. And I'm running with like some Apple SE. It's like the smallest iPhone I've ever seen in my life. And it's my wife calls it a toy. But I don't know, just nothing Apple does really excites me. Like maybe some of the other mega bit players out there, like Microsoft or Google. So if I'm investing in a mega company, I'd rather invest somewhere else instead of Apple.
Okay. Let's get this question up. So, any of these stocks pique your interest, Jose? Umbrella, Audia, BMR. I'm assuming they're all in the semi space. Any of these exciting to you?
Yeah, I mean, I want to say I don't really, from the top of my mind, I don't really know them too much. BMR, so I just Google BMR. BMR is Beamer Imaging, and I'm guessing this deals with lidar, and lidar obviously is important. I'm gonna guess that's what it is based on the name. Let me just take a closer look. But none of these are ones I follow. Let me just. What was another one that I can Google real quick just to Scular, Cullr.
Yeah, I think a lot of these
Um,
are small caps that exploded over the past couple of days as well, and that's what's
yeah, so
asking.
the other one looks like a battery company. So maybe these are big EV plays right now, in forms of either autonomous driving or EV being LiDAR and batteries. I mean, I think the EV market is here to stay. I think autonomous driving is here to stay. And autonomous driving doesn't necessarily only need to go on cars. We're going to see it in things like robotics, humanoid robots, other types of robots in general as well. So I think there's opportunity there. I don't know specifically on those stocks.
Okay, let's go to this one. This one I actually wanted to ask, but I forgot. So, John Stevens, thank you for this question. Intel's down 10% over the past week. They are a cash cow. I think the selling is a bit overdone. At 37, does it look attractive if you want to hold for the next 10 years, or do you think they're so far behind the big guys?
I don't think they're far behind. It's so weird. A few years ago, I used to be maybe not the biggest Intel bear, But I would always make fun of Intel shareholders, or just poke fun, just right, poke fun a little bit. I think now Intel is definitely looking pretty attractive if if you think they're going to succeed in the two things that I'm about to mention. Right now, Intel is really focused on the CPU space, and we kind of talked about it a bit earlier. Google is really entering in the CPU space because the slowdown is there. There's so it's not necessarily being bullish on the CPU space. You need to be bullish on their foundry market. They're getting a lot of incentives from the United States government. We're seeing them going in the right direction in their manufacturing nodes, even though it takes time for us to see it. It's definitely going in the right direction. So you need to be bullish on their foundry market. Do you think they're going to be success? I would say if I had to bet, it was more leaning to yes, they're going to be successful there. The
Right.
second market you have to think that they're going to be successful in is in the AI space. And they're creating AI accelerators. We saw the Gaudi 3. It doesn't mean they're going to be a H100. It doesn't mean they're going to be an Nvidia, but can they grab some market? Can they grow from there? I think if you were to put me on that betting scale, I think my bet would be more on yes. But those are two things that are not going to happen overnight. So if you're looking at a 10-year long-term investment, I think Intel has the probability, and that's what at the end of the day, how I see my investments, the probability of doing good in the long term, especially if those two things become successful. But I'm still not a shareholder. Maybe eventually I will, but right now I'm just too excited about Nvidia's and the others out there.
It's an interesting question. Obviously, we're seeing revenues kind of go down a little bit, net income go down. We covered their earnings. Their Q1 guidance was about 3 billion lower than their Q4 earnings. And the problem here, I think, with Intel as well, is that I don't want it to become a value trap because it fell to $23 in late 2022, and that it was a screaming buy. But it
Mhm.
wasn't just a screaming buy. Everything was a screaming buy in late 2022, right? The market had bottomed. So Intel makes its way back up to $50, where it has historically been over the past basically 6 to 7 years. And now it's struggling at that $37, $38 range. I thought it was range bound from 41 to 46, and then they put out those announcements over the past couple of weeks, and it tanks below. You, I think, are making a really reasonable argument, which is that AMD, Nvidia, SMCI, a lot of these guys are more exciting and they're growing faster and they're doing really interesting things. It's not that Intel's not doing really interesting things, but if it is a value, sort of deep value stock that is trapping shareholders in this price range because other companies are simply more exciting, even if it's from a perception basis, then from a pure stock perspective, maybe it doesn't return the way that an Nvidia returns, even though buying Nvidia 900 is still pretty risky.
Yeah. And Intel, I want to say at $22, that stock had a lot of unknowns. We didn't know how much money they were going to get from the Biden administration or from the US Chips Act. We didn't know how they were moving along the direction in their manufacturing and in their technology evolvements as well. And I think since then, we have seen a lot of cases that are pointing that, hey, look, this is moving in the right direction. Again, this is one of those companies that, even though it's moving in the right direction, it takes a few years for it to showcase. And revenue has decreased. One of the biggest revenues, we had a huge over inventory correction in the PC space. And Intel is the biggest market shareholder of, if you go out there and buy an Intel, go to the PC section, go to the laptop section, Intel is going to be the major shareholder there. So obviously, if we saw a huge over inventory correction in that space, the one who's going to lose the most amount of revenue is going to be the one who holds the most amount of market share, and that was Intel in that market. So I think we're going to start to see a few years where Intel is going to be growing their revenue. And again, it's one that I don't know why I still haven't hit that buy button, but it's not. I want to say it's one of the few semiconductor stocks that's not overvalued.
Does their debt worry you at all? They do have about 50 billion in debt, or does debt for companies like this not matter as much?
No, I mean it matters. It matters as, but you
Well, you know what we need to do? We need to know what interest rate they have, because Verizon has 50 billion in debt too, but their interest rate is significantly lower because they got it in 2019. So if Intel has a good maturity rate on that debt, maybe it's actually not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, they're getting what, almost $8 billion in incentives from of direct funding. They're also going to get some crazy low debt from the United States government, about $11 billion in loans. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be at some crazy, crazy cheap rate that it doesn't really matter, because the United States is just gonna it just wants to build chips in house. So again, I agree. We have to probably take a closer look at where that debt is looking at. Um, and we have to hope that Intel goes into cash flow positive in the future. I think right now it's still free cash flow negative because it's doing all those investments in the foundry side.
So
but eventually those investments are going to stop.
the foundry business, right, in making chips in the US, although they said it's not going to be profitable for a few years, is there any premium the market should be attaching to the fact that they're doing the one thing that most companies aren't, which is building chips outside of Taiwan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that alone is a value within itself. What's the market cap of Intel right now? I think
Let me
it's
check.
like, and let me just look real quick.
Intel is a 159 billion market cap.
Just the market cap of TSMC, obviously you can't compare them, but just so you can see, the market cap of TSMC is about 700 billion.
Yeah.
And then if we take a closer look at AMD has a market cap of 274. And that's that AMD is only really in the CPU and the GPU space, and they don't really have that foundry business, which I think right now, back then, it used to be a negative thing to say you were a foundry play or you had to have a foundry business because it was something that you needed to invest constantly. I think now everybody knows that you can't have chips just being made in one place, and it's starting to become a strong asset. So I think that's something that Intel investors are going to be very excited that Intel's doing right now.
Yeah, and the other thing about Intel is there is a 1.3% divvy, so you're still getting something for owning those shares, even if you're not going to get a ton of capital appreciation as well. Okay, last question. This goes back to the Google discussion we were having, and I think we've talked about it before, but even I forget the answer to this question, so it's always nice to kind of remind people. Google's making an ARM CPU. Astricus here is asking, can't GPUs do what CPUs do? So why is their CPU valuable anyway?
I mean, at the end of the day, there's still a lot of workloads that are done on CPUs in general. So, I mean, you still need CPUs. Like we saw, the evolution of CPUs is a lot slower now. It's not evolving as quickly. So it just makes perfect sense for Intel to say, hey, look, I mean, for Google to say, if this is something that's not evolving as quickly, why don't we just create our own thing like that? We don't have to purchase too much from the other guys. GPUs, there's, again, at the end of the day, there's always going to be perks on using CPUs. And I mean, if you have a laptop, a computer right now, to just have your laptop and computer, you need a CPU to run that GPU, right? So you can't have any GPUs without CPUs.
All right, there you go. That's the
Yeah.
answer to that. Last question, Jose, AMD or Intel?
AMD or man, this is crazy.
We know what you're gonna say. You don't have to,
No, I don't know.
From these prices, you want 100,000 shares of Intel or 100,000 shares of AMD for the next 10 years? I mean, I know what I'm picking. I'm picking some motherfucking Lisa Su. I'm not picking Pat Gelsinger. I always say his name wrong, but whatever. I'm not picking Intel on that.
I think both can be real.
You got to pick Pat Gelsinger or Lisa Su.
I would say the AI accelerator market is growing, so I would probably go with AMD. In forms of growth opportunity, in forms of valuation, I would go with Intel. So it depends on which side you're leaning. Are you a growth player, AMD? If you're a valuation play, Intel.
Yeah, definitely. If you're a valuation play, I think most people would pick Intel. But if you do believe the growth is going to keep happening for AMD, Nvidia, etc., that stock might perform a bit better than Intel. Yeah. All right. This was awesome. Please make sure to follow Jose on Twitter and YouTube if you are not following him yet. Again, it's in the chat and in the description. Jose, thanks so much. I'll see you again next Thursday.
If you're definitely, thank you, and see you next week, man.
Bye, guys. Have a good one. Good night.